He had seen two main branchings along the way ahead. In one, he confronted an evil old baron and said, "Hello, grandfather." The thought of that path and what lay along it sickened him. The other path held long patches of gray obscurity except for peaks of violence. He had seen a warrior religion there, a fire spreading across the universe, with the Atreides green and black banner waving at the head of fanatic legions drunk on spice liquor. Gurney Halleck and a few others of his father's men, the pitiful few, were among them, all marked by the hawk symbol from the shrine of his father's skull. "I can't go that way," he muttered. "That's what the old witches of your schools really want." Paul Atreides, the central figure in Frank Herbert's Dune, is a man burdened with the ability to see countless possible futures through his prescient visions. This extraordinary power allows him to foresee the potential outcomes of his actions and those of others, placing upon him an overwhelming responsibility to choose what he would calculate to be the optimal path. However, the path Paul ultimately selects leads to an interstellar jihad, resulting in the deaths of billions. This outcome begs the profound question, what horrors did Paul foresee that were even worse than the devastation wrought by the jihad? In this video, I'd like to explore the answer to that question and Paul's true motivations for choosing the particular futures which he saw. Spoiler warning if you are unfamiliar with Frank Herbert's Dune series. To understand why Paul chose to lead the jihad, it's crucial to recognize that by the time he foresaw its outbreak, it was already beyond his power to prevent. When Paul's prescience awakened, he only saw two main paths that lay ahead of him, both filled with foreboding. In one, he confronted the malevolent Baron Harkonnen, a vision that sickened him as he realized the path would lead to him acknowledging the Baron as his grandfather, symbolizing the continuation of the Harkonnens' evil legacy through Paul himself. This path was filled with corruption and moral decay, a future that repulsed Paul to his core. The other path was shrouded in gray obscurity, punctuated by peaks of intense violence. In this vision, Paul saw the rise of a warrior religion, a fanatical movement spreading like wildfire across the universe, with the Atreides green and black banner at its forefront. His father's loyal men, including Gurney Halleck, were among the few survivors, but they were marked by the hawk symbol from the shrine of Duke Leto's skull, signifying the brutal cost of this path. This future, while ensuring the survival of the Atreides, promised a universe drenched in blood, driven by legions intoxicated by spice liquor, and blind devotion to their messianic leader. Both futures were grim, but the latter held a terrifying inevitability that Paul felt powerless to escape. Therefore, it can be said that the momentum behind the jihad had already become unstoppable, fueled by the fervor of the Fremen and the political forces in motion. Even if Paul had sacrificed himself, the war would have continued unabated. Confronted with this reality, he made the difficult decision not to become a martyr, but to assume his role as their leader, their messiah, in an attempt to guide the jihad and minimize its devastation. His choice allowed him to exert some control over the chaos, tempering the violence and steering the conflict away from total annihilation, although the path he chose remained one of immense suffering. While 61 billion deaths may seem staggering by Earth standards, it's a fraction of what could have occurred in an empire populated by trillions. Paul's prescient visions likely revealed that without his influence, the jihad could have escalated to catastrophic levels, with entire planets obliterated, as the great houses, desperate to maintain their power, might have resorted to using atomics indiscriminately. Paul's leadership, although it resulted in immense bloodshed, served as a crucial restraining force, preventing the jihad from devolving into total annihilation. By leveraging his power over the Spacing Guild to isolate planets that resisted his rule, Paul facilitated the death of billions, but still was able to limit the devastation. Without his guidance, the Fremen, unrestrained by their messiah, would have unleashed even greater destruction, similarly using their control over the sandworms and the spice to dominate the galaxy and force the guild into submission, enabling them to carry out their zealous crusade across the universe. Another crucial factor in Paul's choices for the future was his intense desire to protect his family and to avenge his father. In the first book, Paul's desire to avenge his father's death and strike back at those who had wronged House Atreides was a powerful motivator that shaped many of his early decisions. His drive for retribution against the Harkonnens and the Emperor certainly guided his choices in selecting which futures to pursue, all in his quest to restore his family's honor. In the second book, Paul's love for Chani and its influence on his prescience became increasingly evident, with his overwhelming desire to protect her becoming perhaps his strongest motivator. As Paul reflected on the choices he had made to keep Chani alive, he questioned whether it was wrong to prioritize her life over securing an heir. However, he ultimately dismissed these doubts as his prescience revealed far more horrifying alternatives: slave pits, torture, agonizing sorrow, and worse. Paul's ability to foresee multiple timelines revealed that all paths ultimately led to Chani's death, or something even worse. Faced with these grim realities, Paul chose the course that would bring Chani the least pain. Although he succeeded in delaying her fate temporarily, Paul knew that her survival beyond childbirth was not possible. He saw that her time was limited, especially with the many plots against their family. In the end, he chose the future that spared her the most suffering, ensuring that her death, though heartbreaking, was the most merciful option available. Paul eventually recognized that the futures he had chosen, while necessary to prevent immediate disaster, both for the Imperium and for his own family's protection, were not enough to secure humanity's long-term survival. He understood that a greater golden path was required to truly safeguard the future of the species. Paul didn't actually know with certainty that every future besides the Golden Path would lead to humanity's extinction. This is revealed during his conversation with his son in the desert, where it's clear that Paul's prescient visions, while vast and powerful, didn't provide him with absolute knowledge of every possible outcome. However, after all the tragedy he had witnessed and endured in his life to that point, the overwhelming horror of this golden path was more than he could bear, making it impossible for him to accept it. This was his second Gom Jabbar, a test of his will and resolve, and he failed. Humanity would have faced extinction had it not been for his son, Leto II. Leto embraced the terrible burden that Paul could not, transforming himself into a tyrant who would rule for millennia, evolving into a being unlike anything that had ever existed. His reward for thousands of years of loneliness and sacrifice would be his eventual death, but only after he succeeded in creating a strain of humanity that could evade the reach of prescience, ensuring humanity's continued survival. Ultimately, Paul's decisions were shaped, if not outright governed, by selfishness. While he chose paths that avoided the biggest calamities, his decisions were often driven more by his personal desires and the need to protect his loved ones than by a commitment to humanity's greater good. Despite his vast power and prescient abilities, Paul remained deeply human, guided by personal motives rather than selfless ideals. While history might occasionally see the emergence of figures like Leto II, who are willing to sacrifice everything for the survival of humanity, most individuals, like Paul, are led by their emotions and attachments, making choices that prioritize those closest to them over the broader welfare of society. But I'm curious to know what you think of the paths that Paul decided to take. Are there any factors in his choices for the Imperium, whether selfish or altruistic, that stand out to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to show your appreciation, you can check out my Patreon page, where members get access to exclusive content and perks. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.